Disclaimer and warning statement. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Exposing Deathcare podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the host or the podcast. Content warning. This podcast contains discussions of sensitive topics related to the funeral industry, including unethical practices, trauma, and misconduct. Listener discretion is advised. The stories shared in this podcast are presented anonymously to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Thank you for listening, and we hope that by sharing these stories, we can work together to improve the funeral industry for everyone involved. Welcome to Exposing Deathcare, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the funeral industry, revealing the truth behind its darkest practices. I'm your host, Em, and each episode we bring you real stories from funeral directors and death care workers who have experienced the best and worst of this hidden world. Once again, before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. The stories shared on this podcast are anonymous and may contain sensitive content. Listener discretion advised.
Welcome to Exposing Deathcare, and today we have Initial A here to share their stories with us.
Hi.
Welcome to the show, A.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. How did you get into death care? What's your role?
So I got into death care because my original career path was criminalistics, the forensic side of it, and that sort of led me toward doing death work. My overall focus of what I was trying to get to is county coroner. So mortuary school and all of that is kind of like my stepping stone to get to where I want to go. It definitely started with criminalistics and studying forensics. My goal now, I work part-time for a funeral home, and I basically just do a little bit of everything.
How long have you been doing this?
I'm fairly new. I've been studying towards funeral services for 3 years now. Working with the funeral home is fairly recent, probably since like May.
Are you already in school?
The program starts in the fall, so actually on the 26th. So yeah, very soon.
You're knocking on that door.
Oh my God, yes. I'm like pounding. I'm ready to like break the door down.
I'm proud of you. That's awesome. So sometimes people have a comment about what their training was like. Do you have any shocking stories from your training as you entered into this field?
So training is a quite funny way of wording that because I don't think I had training. So I guess mortuary school is technically your training, whether you do clinicals or whether you do a field study. But like I said, the program hasn't started yet. So this funeral home was basically like, hey, yeah, just come hang out with us and we'll get you doing stuff. And my second funeral, I basically had a death call and I had to just go and deal with it. Like there was no training. It was like, you just need to go.
So up and out you went.
Oh yeah. Cause like you don't have time to think. When you get a death call, you have to respond within 30 minutes to an hour. And we were literally in the middle of a service and there was 3 of us. So 2 of us had to leave and just go. So she was just like, take the cot, put it in the van. Let's go. We got to get this guy. And it was just like, okay. So, I mean, I'm very much for faking it until I make it, I guess. Just like not letting people tell that I don't know what I'm doing and I just do it.
That's an excellent way to put it. Faking
yeah,
it
and then I just freak out later.
Yeah, I had an employer tell me that one time. Actually, it was the employer's wife. She was just like, you got to fake it until you make it. And she was so serious at the time. And I didn't realize until I looked back how serious she was. She just wanted us to fake it.
Yeah, I mean, it's serious, but then, part of me is also like, is it appropriate for the kind of work that I do? And I want to still say yes and no, because you have to remember you are a professional and you are called upon to help these people in a time where they can't help themselves. So you don't want them to see you slipping. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you really have to try and put that mask on and just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it.
I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and I'm going to make sure that you don't know I don't know what's going on. When that happened, were you working for a family-owned funeral home or a corporate funeral home?
Family.
Family-owned. That seems to happen a lot. Well, okay, I've seen it happen in corporate entities too, where they don't have enough staffing to be able to spread themselves. They are spread very thin, is the way to put it. So it's amazing that you're able to pivot from one thing directly into the next one.
And that's the thing with this job too, where it's just, you could be doing one thing and at the drop of a hat, you need to switch it up and do something else. You could be in a dead
Yes.
sleep and get a death call and you have to put on your Sunday best and you have to go and get this body, but you're also having to talk to staff if it's at a nursing home or if it's at a hospital. If it's a home retrieval, then you have to talk to the family. So it's a lot of switching roles from doing one thing to doing something completely different. You could be talking to the family at the funeral home, making arrangements, and then have to switch it up and go prep a body because you have a viewing later on tonight.
Exactly. And being able to be flexible like that is something that people need to keep in mind when they're getting into this kind of.
It's almost like you have to constantly be in professional mode. Like you can't, you can't have a switch because like I said, you could be hanging out with your family and then you get a death call. You have to leave. And you have to go visit with the family. And now you have to put on your funeral director voice and your funeral director demeanor and just do this. And it's I don't know. I'm realizing that it's just like it's a roller coaster of a lot of different roles and outfits and just everything.
Oh, yeah. And for those of us that are introverts, it becomes a really good excuse to get out of things that we don't want to do. Like, say you have to go to little Susie's birthday party and you get there and you're like, yeah, this just isn't hitting for me today. You could be like, oh, I got to go. So-and-so died.
See, look at you. I think you already understand slightly of who I am because I'm waiting for my opportunities. Just be like, got a viewing. Sorry, I can't do this.
You still did your best. You showed up, but then you booked it out of there, and nobody can fault you for that.
Oh yeah, you could use that. Awesome. You can use that excuse way more than faking your grandma's death to call out of work. I can use that till the end of time. Oh, I got a death, gotta go.
Yep, comes in handy. So, what is some advice for others that you have currently, and as you've been progressing towards school?
Honestly, my advice to anyone currently in the business or anyone who's pursuing the business, even this early on for me, my advice would be pay attention to your own self-care. And I say this because there are a lot of people in this industry who don't take themselves into consideration first because they're helping the grieving families and they're dealing with their families. And if you don't take care of your own self-care and you don't have a good support system, then this business is not for you, or this business is going to break you. And it's very sad because divorce rates are super high amongst funeral workers, and so is alcoholism. And that right there just shows they're not taking enough care of themselves because they're taking care of other families and their families. And people don't understand the stress and like how it weighs down the funeral professional, and it leads to things that like divorce and alcoholism and just family destruction, and it's really sad.
Yeah, in the years that I've spent in funeral service, alcoholism has always been a predominantly heavy one. Now I think that burnout and PTSD are going to be something that we need to pay a lot of attention to, especially now that we've come out of the worst part of COVID. I know I'm not the only one that's struggling with a PTSD diagnosis and trying to, get my head on straight after that. So if anybody out there is listening and they're on the verge, we understand. We understand. And my best advice is to seek therapy sooner than later.
Absolutely. I found out recently too that funeral service professionals do not have access to therapy like other professions do, which is mind-boggling to me. But I think it's because the training that you get, if you decide to not be a funeral director or an embalmer, you can be a grief counselor. So they think, well, they have training to deal with their own mental health because they're helping other people deal with their mental health. But that's not how that works.
Yes, I can attest to that. That's not how it works. I could give and give and pour and pour and pour from the same pitcher, but eventually my pitcher is going to run out and there's not going to be anything left for me or my friends or my family. And you're burning yourself at both ends, and it doesn't do you or the industry any good at all.
It doesn't. And I get people ask silly questions, like, oh, does it feel weird asking people for money when they're like trying to bury a family member? And it's like, that's not it's not like what we do. Like, yeah, but then it's also no. I'm not the first question out of my mouth when I sit with a family isn't how much money do you have, or like, oh, like that's and from that part of the job, I'm a bad salesperson. Like, that's not my focus
Hmm.
when I deal with families, or even when they come into the funeral home. I'm not focused on, you know, how much money I can get out of these people. Like, that's the farthest thing from my mind. If they told me that they want the cheapest option, the first thing I'm going to show them is our cheapest option, and I'm going to fight that to the end to make sure that they get the cheapest option. You know what I mean? I'm not going to try and encourage them, or try to convince them to go higher up on the ladder. Like, I'm not into that. Like, I don't feel good about that. But
Yeah, that was also something I struggled with too. Is
yeah,
shopping out of my own pocketbook is what somebody termed it to me one time.
oh yeah, funeral directors get lumped in to, how we are as professionals, just like cops and like lawyers and like doctors. Like, we all get lumped into this category, and it's just like, we're not all like that though. Like, don't let a couple bad apples, spoil the bunch. Like,
Yep, I agree. And you can usually tell. I mean, if you have a conversation with a funeral professional, especially if you're having to make those financial decisions and planning, you can tell if somebody is trying to manipulate you financially into making certain decisions. The problem is when you are in the throes of grief, all you want to do is trust a trusted person.
absolutely.
So that some of that goes out the window. So I've worked for some terrible humans in the funeral industry that made it their mission to upsell and to lie to families. And yeah, those bad apples have spoiled it for the rest of us that are out there actually in this business because we want to be in a heart-based business, not lining our pockets.
Absolutely. And it's a job. It's a job that at times that can be thankless, because, we do take a heat of a lot of the stuff that the funeral directors aren't in control of. And you do get a lot of misplaced anger from the family members. That just comes with it. But it's at the end of the day, it's a very rewarding job because somebody has to do it. And it's very sad that there aren't enough people in this profession, and that we're severely short staffed. And, we're not shooting mortuary students out like, like nurses are. But
Mm-hmm. We're getting
somebody
close
has,
though.
yeah, it's, somebody has to do it. It's very, so statistically, this is what I heard. Funeral program that I am entering, a full class is 25 students. Right now we're at 22, so we're not even full. So usually less than half finish. So less than half of the 22 would finish. Less than half of that number will actually pursue funeral services. And then less than half of that number is going to stay in this area. So even still, with the 22 that you got, you're probably only going to get a handful that stay in the area that I live in. So there's not enough of us, and that's another reason why I can't stress enough focusing on your own self-care, because yeah, burnout, you're short staffed, you're going to be wearing a lot of hats, and it will take a toll, and you'll have to evaluate and think to yourself, like, do I want to do this? Even as new as I am to the profession, I've had moments to where I even sit there and I'm like, do I want to do this? Like, is this it?
Right.
But I can't stop. Like, I have to lace those boots up, and I have to keep going.
It's something I've heard from a couple other industries. You mentioned nursing. They're having a really hard time getting good mentors because the boomers that are going out or the burnout Gen Xers, they don't want to teach anymore. They're done. They're tired. It ends up with a situation like you've got bullies in Facebook groups that are just going to tear down anybody that they can get their hands on that is trying to make a difference in this industry or whatever industry they're tapped into. So it's hard not having mentors and support people like that when the opportunity is there. These people exist. They're just mean.
Yeah. But and that turns people off for a lot of reasons too. Like, when people find out what I do, it's either one of two reactions. There's never a middle. It's either they're fascinated or they're absolutely disgusted. Because they're like,
Hmm.
oh, I can't do that. Like, oh, that's disgusting, or I can't be around dead bodies, or they're intrigued and they're super fascinated. But I think that's a turnoff in the job too, where it's like people know what you do and they're like, well, I can't do that. But nursing and doctors, like, it's still kind of similar too. You're dealing with the public. You do deal with death in a sense. You're dealing with families, and it's all related into like what all of us deal with and what we see, and how we deal with people, and whether or not we decide to want to teach or continue being in our profession. My goal after mortuary school is to specialize in travel embalming, because I know funeral homes are very family based. The guy I work for now is third generation, so it's very family based. His sons and his children have no interest in taking over the business. So, I mean, if I get the opportunity to run my own home, that will be my focus. But my focus after mortuary school was travel embalming, because I'm not limited to just being stationary in one spot. I can go anywhere in the state. I can work for myself, and it's rewarding to take that route. But I mean, depending on how things go, I would love to teach and have somebody learn under me and teach them the tools of the trade, and continue on to the next generation of funeral professionals.
There's a lot of hope for the next generations that are coming in, especially myself being in here as long as I have. Let's see, when did I? So I first darkened the halls of a funeral home in 1997. Man alive, just the times between then and now. The people that are getting into this industry now, I'm really excited for. Back when I was getting into it, there weren't more women than men in the mortuary classes. So I've seen it go a long way, and I'm really hoping that the new people that are finding this career field and exploring these options are treated better and handled better as we learn how to do these things better.
The job, as with any job, comes with its ups and downs, and it has its pros and cons, but I love it. Like, it's the equivalent of like a rock star when they step on that stage and the lights go on and they're ready to just do their set. And the second I step into the church and I have my assignment and the family's showing up, I'm like, I got this. Boom.
So what's something else you want to talk about in your experience in death care that you want to expose for other people to understand?
I had a recent experience at, actually, two. I was doing a service in a mausoleum for the first time. I didn't even know that was something that we did, so clearly still learning things. We had the day before was the mass service for the decedent. So the next day we had to drive him an hour because he was going to be buried back at home. So we went to the mausoleum. The priest came, family was there. He did his thing. And this is always what happens to me. But anytime it's open casket and we tell the family, okay, now is the moment you can pay your last respects, I lose it. And this past week with the mausoleum service, I actually cried and had to dismiss myself so that I wouldn't be noticed, because that just does something. Like, I felt like I knew this man. It's just like, I was like, let me separate myself, because I know that I'm a human, but I'm still here to provide a service. And I don't want them taking it or looking at me any kind of way of just like, oh, she can't keep it together. You think she'd be used to this? Like, you do funerals all the time. So I had to dismiss myself, but it made me so sad. It made me so sad. They were talking to this man and they kissed him, and the wife was rubbing his hair, and she was like, I'll see you soon. When she said, I'll see you soon, I was done. I was like, let me go outside, because I can't.
That happens to the best of us, I want to say. Those of us that still have soft hearts.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's that expression, you get used to it, and like the more you're around something, the easier it becomes. But when that happens, those catch me off guard, because like I said, I was fine. The casket was open the entire time, and friends and family were there and they were doing their thing. But it always seems to hit me harder when I'm feeling it from their point of view, where it's like, oh, it's really happening now. They're closing the casket and they're taking it away. I was just like, listen, I'm going to go sit outside for a second.
Yep. You have to recenter and refocus.
I mean, even as early on, I think it was maybe like my second funeral, I've even seen what has been talked about in the funeral industry, where you have spouses that die at close range to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So we had
broken heart syndrome.
Yeah, that. So we had a decedent who had passed, and the wife had called the funeral home to make the arrangements. And within a week of making the arrangements, she fell ill and she was in the hospital. And within a month, she had passed. So the daughter had to take over the arrangements. And then it just became a dual funeral for both of them.
Oh my goodness. So they kept him at the funeral home until like a month later when they did her service, or was it more like a memorial?
It was a memorial because I think they both opted for cremation. So the service that we had at the funeral home was just a memorial service for for people who don't know what the difference is. The difference is a memorial service is a service when the body is not present because it has either been cremated or the body was donated to science or whatever. There's just nobody present. So it was a memorial service. So they had opted for cremation and they were going to be buried together. The urns were going to be buried together. So it was a memorial service that we did at the funeral home. And it was like sharing their lives as kids and then when they met and then with their children. And that also kind of brought me such joy in a weird way to where it was just like such a happy ending to life.
Yeah.
It's
a
like
good final closing chapter.
Yeah, it's like you see things like that and you're like, oh, in a perfect world, if anything, if everything could just end like that, everything would be so much better.
One of the most memorable broken heart syndromes that I had was we did the funeral for the guy, and at the gravesite, the wife had to have the ambulance called because she was feeling faint, whatnot. Ambulance took her away. 3 days later, we're sitting down with the family again, planning Mama's funeral.
Aw.
Yep. So they lived their whole lives together and exited the same week.
That's wild to think how that. So do you honestly, truly, truly believe that it is, broken heart syndrome,
Yes.
as in the person's just realizing they can't live without their spouse?
100%. Yep. I believe that exists, is a thing, and takes out some of the best people.
I agree. I think that's what it is too. When I took my responding to the bereaved class, which is a requirement to get into the program, there was a whole section on broken heart syndrome, and because they hit on it because it's something you're going to see, and some people don't believe in it. Some people just think, oh well, he was old, she was old, things just happened. But I don't think it's a coincidence that spouses die within close range of each other. I just think, yeah, she's too old to go through life by herself, and that's what happened.
The love was too strong
to do it alone. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that.
Before we wrap up, is there anything that you've experienced so far that's brought you great pride?
Great pride? Honestly, the opportunity in itself just brings me pride. The churches that I get to visit, the families I get to sit with, them showing me appreciation, that is all I need to be prideful about anything, because I know that my decision was the right decision for me to make in terms of my career path and like where I'm going. I know every time that I am at a church and I'm helping on a service and I'm, or I'm driving bodies to the crematory, like I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that's all I need. This is what I should be doing and I'm going to do it.
And I will say the caveat to that is having a supportive employer. That's part of the deal in being successful, is having a supportive employer, and it sounds like you've got one of those right now.
Oh, absolutely. Because he understands it. He's been in the funeral business for 35 years. Like I said, he's third generation, so he gets it. He has a wife and he has kids. He has 5 kids, and so he completely understands it. And as a student coming in, he's probably being for me what he would have wanted somebody to be had he not grew up in a funeral home, because he obviously learned under his dad and his grandfather. But I think he's being for me what he would want somebody to be for him had he not had a funeral family.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it so much easier.
Yeah, that's a very intelligent way to look at it.
That's what I would hope to be for somebody else too. If I had the opportunity to teach or, have somebody learn under me, I want to be for somebody what I would want somebody to do for me. You want me to be the next you, then I need to be the next you.
Just don't let them burn you at both ends. That's all I can say.
Oh yeah, no.
Thank you for tuning in to an episode of Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. I truly appreciate your support and the courage of those who have shared their stories with us. If you or someone you know has a story to share, we encourage you to reach out. Your anonymousness will be protected, and your story could help prevent further harm. You can leave comments, ask questions, or provide feedback on our social medias, Exposing Deathcare, or email exposingdeathcare@gmail.com. Podcast music by Enlia.